Hi, and welcome to The Flex with Aaliyah. Today, I'm talking about my adventures of my most recent 100-miler race. Woo! Very exciting. And today, joining me, I have Kathleen Davis. Welcome.
Hi.
And we structured this episode kind of like an interview. So Kathleen's going to be asking me some questions, and I'm going to give you the nitty-gritty of all the fun stuff that happened, the hard things that happen, maybe some funny things, whatever it is. And I'm going to share it honestly so you have a good perspective of what 100 miles is like if you just want something funny to listen to, or maybe you're interested in doing a 100-miler. Maybe not, you never know. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen to kind of lead this episode.
Hey, everyone. My name is Kathleen. Leah didn't mention it, but she's been coaching me for a little over 3 years now, and she's coached me through many races, including some Spartan Ultras, several 50-milers, a Tough Mudder Holy Grail, and two 32-hour races. One I got to 75 miles, and one I got to over 100 miles. So while Aaliyah has coached me through many ultras, she has never actually done one herself. So as you know, Aaliyah is more like the running and gunning type. She knows Frontline, Midwest OCR, the OCR Champs, even dabbling in Ninja this year. But like I said, even in marathon bodybuilding, when Aaliyah's career is very illustrious, but no 100-milers in there. So she had some time on her schedule this year, and we'd kind of been talking. And she mentioned a 100-miler in Florida, which I kind of suggested against because some people got hit by cars. But then she found another one in Georgia, which we started talking about, and she decided to pull the trigger for that. And if you've listened to some of her other episodes, she kind of got into her nutrition, her gear, her training plan. But now that's all said and done, and she has brought her buckle back to us. Congrats, yay.
Woo!
Today, I just kind of wanted to talk about her experience and, kind of what worked, what didn't. So let's just kind of get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the race? It's the Bootlegger 100 in Georgia. It was a 20-mile multi-lap format. But why don't you just tell us a little bit about exactly what the course format was like?
The course format for the 100-mile Bootlegger was 5 laps of 20 miles. You had your station set up at that start-finish line, and then you went off every 6 miles. There was an aid station. There was no signage about how far you went or anything like that. You would just come to an aid station, and it was broken up into 6-mile sections. So 0 to 6, then you had your aid station. Then you had 6 to 12, next aid station. Then you had your 12 to 18, which ended up being like a little loop and came back up to the same aid station where you were for your 12th one. But now you were at mile 18, and then you had 2 miles back to the start finish. The course was mostly trail, single track, rolling hills. I won't say they were gentle. There was definitely a lot of rolling hills, continuous up and down. My favorite was the down because it felt like a little relaxation on your legs. When you started, you actually started on pavement, and maybe you went 3/4 of a mile on pavement. Of course, a big steep hill to start, and then you had a nice downhill before you went into the trail. Then when it ended, you had about 2 miles of gravel, this unpleasant rock, and then pavement the rest of the way. And again, continuous rolling hills. There was never completely flat. You're either gradually going up or gradually going down. And you really felt that uphill later in the race when your legs are a little bit tired. That kind of sums up what the course was like and where the aid stations were placed.
And we had talked about this, you and I, offline extensively about your pit. And so you drove to the race.
Yes, that's correct. I drove so I could keep all my shit with me.
Right, you drove. And because you had to, you didn't have a crew, and you had to pack in and pack out everything yourself. You went with more of a minimalist approach for your pit. And we had this ongoing debate about whether or not you were going to bring a chair.
Ha! Fuck the chair! No chair!
So why don't you kind of tell everybody kind of like what your pit setup was like? One thing we didn't mention is the weather. this has sort of informed your gear too, which we'll get into. But can you tell us a little bit about your pit setup and the weather, sort of how you prepared?
Weather-wise, I had looked up in advance, and also they were telling us, because we were getting weekly emails leading up to it. When I had reached out to them, they said the evenings were going to be mid-40s. I was like, okay, that could be slightly cool depending on how you're feeling. So I brought long pants to put over my shorts and a couple long sleeve running shirts. And my main thing that I was planning on wearing was a tech shirt. Lo and behold, I also packed a tank top or two just in case on the off chance, or for some of my training runs leading up to it while I'm traveling. The weather actually ended up being quite hot. On Friday, the day before the race, it was 85 degrees. On Saturday, I have no clue what the temperature was because I wasn't really looking at my phone, but everybody from that area in Georgia was like, this is really hot for Georgia. It is like a high compared to what it's been. And they were expecting it to be more like it's 65, 70. And a lot of people actually got affected by the heat. They had big ice buckets at every aid station. And I think that kind of was impromptu and not necessarily planned because it was way hotter than they thought. So you would come to an aid station, there was ice for drinking, and then there was a separate ice bucket for you to stuff your shirt, your sports bra. And I was definitely filling my sports bra up with ice. Nice bust there because I have nice chunks of ice in it. And then I was also putting it down my back so it would sit in my tank top, which I ended up wearing. And if you have listened to a previous podcast, I wasn't going to wear a tank top because I didn't want to chafe on my arm. But I was like, screw it, I'm wearing the tank top. It's too hot. Initially, I did have a t-shirt on and I changed it. And I'm so happy I did because of how hot it was. They also had washcloths that for us that were sitting in ice cold water. And I remember I was totally unexpected. I came to an aid station and I was like knelt over or something. And someone just like put this thing on my neck. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? And it was this ice cold cloth. And I just felt instantly cooled down. I was still hot, but it helped significantly. And then I would run with it at every aid station. I dunk it in and put it back on my neck. I have a photo. I think it was lap 3. And I have it like covered over my head. I almost did my hair, but I was like, no, I'm not going to poof up my hair because I'm probably going to have to pour water on myself. And so I have this cloth just draped over my head. And you can just see my eyes, and I just look like I'm having the time of my life. So that was the weather. And then my pit area, yes, very minimalistic, partly because I was traveling, but also that's who I am. I want to just bring the essentials. And if I thought I needed something, yep, I absolutely did bring it. I had a big cooler, and I filled it with ice the day before. Amazing cooler. The ice... When I made it back to PA, I still had ice in it. Like, I was so impressed.
I just want to interject and say that you almost didn't bring it. You almost didn't bring the cooler.
That is correct. I almost didn't bring the cooler because I was thinking about the temperature and what they had told me. And then and also I didn't want to, after the race, I don't want to move this thing. It's really heavy and cumbersome. And when you're tired, you're like, ugh. But I figured I could corral people who didn't do the race to move it for me if I couldn't, which actually is what happened. I just didn't want to try to move it. So I asked because it was filled with ice. It was filled with water bottles and all sorts of shit. And I didn't move it. They picked it up and moved it for me. But so yes, I did teeter the day before leaving on maybe I don't need to bring this, but I did bring it anyway. It was a great decision to bring that. And as Kathleen said, I didn't bring a chair. In one of the conversations between her and I, she's like, on this list, why don't you have a chair? Bring a chair. I was like, I don't want a chair. What the fuck am I going to do with a chair? She's like, you're going to sit in the chair. I was like, I could sit on the cooler. But what if you want to change your shoes? I could sit on the cooler. Don't you want a chair? No, I don't want a chair. Because if I sit down, I'm not going to want to get up. And I barely sat during this entire thing because it was not in my plan. I think I sat at a couple aid stations. Most of the aid stations I stood. When it got really hot midday and I felt like ass, I did sit because I just didn't feel well. And at one point I changed my socks, which was after lap 4. I changed my socks and that's when I sat on the cooler. Cause like, I can't believe how much stuff gets in your shoe while you're running. And it's like, how did this little piece of hay turn straight up to poke me right in my big toe? It's like, how did you get in there and invert yourself? Which is insane. My aid station, very minimal. I had a table. If you saw in any of my Instagram stories, that's just what it was. And then once I set up the day of, I had 2 lanterns, which one of my gym members lent to me. Huge help. I had a box that had all my electronics in it. So all my chargers, headlamps, cords, nasal spray, gum, cough drops. But it was mainly electronics. So I already knew what was going to be in there. My water bottles, some of them were in the cooler. Some of them were out on top so I could make quick changes if I needed to. And then I had my food bin. My food bin, I've talked about what I had in it. I had like peanut butter crackers, more cough drops, gum, some unfrosted Pop-Tarts, a couple lollipops, Airheads, the chess cookies, pretzels, stuff like that. And on the first lap, I set my vest up with a little bag that had a couple chess cookies in it, peanut butter crackers, and then I had my 2 flasks in addition to my hydration pack. So my hydration pack was only water, and then my 2 flasks were mostly water, but with a little scratch in them, lemon lime flavor, which worked out really well, but still very sweet for me. So it definitely diluted it. And that was kind of my setup for it. I had my extra shoes out. Anything I didn't need, I had left in the car because I was able to park pretty much right across from my table, which worked out really well. I made a sign. I went to the Dollar General and I got a poster board and I made a sign. I wrote some stuff on it and I had brought index cards with me to put on my table, tape down, and cross off my laps as I went to give me a little motivation and incentive every time I restarted a lap. And that's exactly what my pit station looked like. Now, everybody else looked very intense. No pun intended, because they were intense, but they had like shelves that they could pull out, massive food sections and tents and all these chairs. But a lot of them had people who were pitting them. So they do want those pit crew members to be comfortable. There was another aid station where your pit members could be, which was that 1218, the same pit station, where individuals not racing, but were pitting people could go and set up as well.
It really kind of leads me to sort of my next question. So you had you had your nutrition, you had your gear. I kind of want to know, like, out of all the stuff you brought, all the food you eat, like, what worked? What worked for you? What didn't work for you?
In all my planning, in all my setup, I pretty much ate nothing from my station. I didn't have water from my station. I didn't have ginger ale, apple juice, the food, nothing from my station did I even touch, which is insane.
Did you eat the stuff that was in your pack that you were carrying?
The first lap when I was on, I was like, okay, you need to start eating in this first lap. So I took out a peanut butter cracker, just one, and I ran with it. And every so often I'd nibble on it. I'd like take a bite, but it also makes your mouth dry. So I'm just like nibbling, take a little sip of water, chugging along. I'm like, okay, it's been 10 minutes. I guess I'll take another little nibble. I didn't make it through those peanut butter crackers. I probably ate maybe 2, and I ate 1 or 2 chess crackers, cookies. I put a piece of gum in my mouth because when I run, I always have gum tucked on the side. It's just a habit and something I always do. I could not tolerate any sugar. I spit the gum out. I didn't want it. And I was like, my mouth is going to be so dry. I'm just going to have to keep sipping on these things. when I got to the first aid station, I didn't really need anything. I think I took a bite of cantaloupe, and then I was like, oh, we're just going to keep going. You don't need anything. And then when I made it to the second aid station, holy shit, they were like NASCAR. I rolled up and they're like, what do you need? And I was like, oh, I'm going to get water. And I was getting ready to take the flask out, and they just like pull it out, unscrew it, start filling it up. And I was like, oh shit, I don't even need to do anything.
Nice. Shout out to the aid stations at Bootlegger.
Yeah, the aid stations crushed it. And then I went to take off my vest so I could fill up my hydration pack with water. Like, no, leave it on. And they like undo it themselves so that way I didn't have to do anything. I was like, okay, I'll just chill. The flask got filled with Gatorade and my hydration pack with water. And at that aid station, I think again, I had a couple bites of fruit and maybe a sip of Coke or ginger ale. I wasn't feeling anything in my stomach, but I was like, you're going to need calories. And it was easier for me to drink than eat. And then I went out on that mile 12 to 18. When I came back in, I probably had some peanut M&Ms. They had there. I was like, ooh, these look good. Because I don't like the nerds. But those I was able to eat because they weren't overly sweet. And I held them, and then all the color stuck to my hand. I was like, that's gross. So I just shoved them in one of the pockets of my vest, and I was like, and we're off. I wasn't expecting there to be an aid station at the finish or start line. When you went through the finish arch, you had to go through a building, which is where they had all their tech stuff set up, so you could look at the computer, see where you were. And they actually had an aid station in there. I don't remember if I got anything on that first lap when I finished. And then I just went off, and I knew in my head that when you start lap 3, that's when you have to grab your headlamp and your chest lamp. But on the off chance I didn't, I kept a chest lamp in my bag the entire time, just as a backup. You never know. That second lap, when I got to the first aid station, there were so many people sitting there, and it was the heat, because now we were hitting the hottest part of the day. I would say I felt the heat, but we were always shaded, which made it so much more bearable. And I wouldn't have been like, man, I feel like shit because of this heat. But I didn't feel great when I got there. And someone that I had seen on the first lap, they're like, yeah, I've been chilling here for a while and I feel so much better. So I really tried to refuel then. And when I say refuel, I nibbled on Doritos. They had nacho cheese Doritos. Everything looked disgusting. I didn't want to eat anything, but I was like, okay, I think I can handle a nacho cheese Dorito. And so I looked like a little weird squirrel, just like nibbling the corner of it slowly. Again, didn't really want anything with sugar, so I stopped refilling my flask full with Gatorade. I ended up doing like half water and then a little bit of Gatorade because I just didn't want the sugar. I wanted nothing except for something savory, which is interesting because I wasn't eating a lot of sugar anyway. That first lap, I took a shot block that had sodium in it. It was a salt watermelon shot block. And I don't chew them. I just like suck on them and so they can slowly dissolve. And even that was a little too much for me. And I got through it. But after that, I pretty much stayed with savory. How I define my laps, lap 1 was excited. I'm going at it. I'm smiling. I'm like, yeah, this is so cool. We're doing something fun and something new and crazy. Lap 2, I'm miserable. I'm hot. That was lap 2. Lap 3, I had a second win. I was like, woohoo, crushing it. And the only reason I think lap 3 worked was when I came out of my 18th mile and I was at that pit station. They had barbecue sandwiches. Now that sounds absolutely disgusting to me. I didn't want one, but I was like, okay, you're going to force yourself. So they hand me one and I'm looking at it. I was like, you guys have one with chicken? Because I was pretty sure it was pork. And it was pork. And I don't eat pork except for bacon because bacon's delicious. But they're like, no, I'm sorry. I was like, oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'll be fine. I was just going to pick at the fruit or something. And then I saw on the bottom, they had ramen. I was like, can I have some ramen? They're like, well, it's for later. We don't have any made. I was like, okay, no big deal. And the one woman who was awesome, she was there every aid. She was the head honcho at that aid station who crushed it. She was like, we can pour some in a cup. Just don't eat it for like 5 minutes. Like, can do. I start going. I'm holding the little cup. And that was the end of lap 2 was I was started eating ramen. The broth tasted really good because it had that salt, that sodium. And then the noodles were carb, but pretty plain for the most part. And then when I got to the finish line, same thing. I was like, hey, do you guys have any ramen? They did the exact same thing for me. They put it in a cup, just a little bit of water, because it was the massive pack. So it wasn't like the individual cups of oodles and noodles. And same thing. I would start moving right away. I wouldn't just eat it and feel full in my stomach. I would sip and nibble on the noodles. And then that's when I went into lap 3 and I felt great. And I think it was because I started eating that, even though it wasn't something that I was like, yes, let's crush this eating. The fuel helped because now I had a little bit energy. It did not start to get cooler. It felt still just the same temperature. But that was lap 3 with my nutrition. I was living on ramen every single lap. That was the only thing I would eat. And I started stacking up these cups because it was a sustainable event. So they actually gave you a cup that you could use to refill. And then when you got to the drinks, if you didn't have it, they had a communal cup that you could use if you didn't have yours. So I would have these ramen cups and I would stack them in my vest. And then when I would leave, I had a cup of ice and a cup of ramen because chewing the ice was very satisfying to me. It would cool me off. It wasn't water, but it was still giving me the hydration I needed. And that's pretty much what I ate. I didn't touch anything of the food in my aid station like I thought I would. Was, lo and behold, the ramen. I did try to eat something else at one point, and every time I came in, they're like, oh, we have mashed potatoes. That sounds disgusting. I like mashed potatoes, but the thought of the texture, I was like, no. But for some reason, the ramen was the thing I could always eat, and maybe that's what I told myself I could eat. So every aid station after that second lap, is what I would consume. That pretty much sums up what I used from my from my pit station, which was pretty much nothing. I did get to use my chargers once. My chest lamp did die at one point, but I had my headlamp. I wasn't too far from my personal pit station, and I just charged it, took another one, and went out. And again, if something happened, I had that one in my bag. After lap 4, it was still dark out and it was early in the morning. I had the batteries. I assumed the batteries in my headlamp were starting to die because it wasn't as bright. And I changed the batteries and it was like, boom, here we go. Speaking of which, some people run with like high beams. Holy shit. I don't know what lights they're using, but they were blinding because there was a section where we did that loop. There was a short period of time where we crossed paths. And the first lap, I was like, am I going the right way? And they're like, yeah. So you went down the hill while people were pretty much going up the hill. And then you did this loop and you went back up the hill.
That's me. I run with high beams. Well, I'm glad the aid stations worked out because we had kind of talked about that too, about your nutrition. It was like, well, if you weren't happy with the stuff you brought or if it didn't work out, that you could use the aid station support. So that's awesome. I'm glad that you could thrive on ramen.
They were so good. They were amazing, the pit stations. I'm so glad they had ramen. I did try to eat a pancake at one point in the morning when they made pancakes, and I just like chewed it like I hated food. I was just macerating it in my mouth, and I didn't want to swallow the pancake. I ended up spitting it out and throwing it out because it didn't work. It didn't do it for me, which is interesting that the texture component becomes a huge issue. I didn't have any upset stomach issues, which is surprising because a lot of things I heard were that you're going to be living off of liquid nutrition. Technically, I guess the broth was, but I was able to maintain eating the noodles which I was surprised at. I was expecting to feel worse than I did.
Especially given the heat.
Yes, especially given the heat. And yeah, I survived. Even running at night wasn't that bad. Not that I thought it was going to be bad because I'm moving. I wasn't going to feel tired unless I stopped. I yawned once and I was like, "Ooh, let's get out of this aid station." And I wasn't even there for that long. The only thing about the night that I didn't like, because I was running along like, "Ooh, this is so nice," and I had the music as a backup. I think I ran with music starting my third lap for like 20 minutes and then I turned it off because as it got dark, I just really wanted to focus on my footing and everything like that. I was like, this is so nice and peaceful. I'm just bouncing along and it's dark. If you turn off your headlights, you can't see anything. It's pitch black. So I'm running along and all of a sudden I'm like, there was a snake on the path and I screamed. I legit fucking screamed. And because like, also, like, if I stepped on it, I probably would have, like, had a heart attack. And it was moving, and then it stopped moving, and it looked at me, I was like, no, no, no. It's a single-track trail, so there wasn't much space to go anywhere, but I was like, okay, let's get over this and keep running. Yeah, luckily, I never saw that snake again, thank goodness. But I did see a skunk, a possum. There was something that was moving. I screamed multiple times and raised my poles up like, I'm bigger than you, get away, whatever it was, because I can't see them, but they can see me, and I could see their eyes. I was like, I'm not playing this game. And that's the only part where I became more hyper vigilant. I was like, I don't like running. And this lap, that was lap 4. That was my grumpy as fuck lap because I was like, I'm tired of these animals, these cobwebs that I keep running into, even though we're all running on the same track. I didn't trip as much, but during that 4th lap, when you're tired, you're like, so tired of tripping. And these bugs, I had layers of bug spray on me and still bugs were like, ooh, we're going to touch you. I'm like, get off. So that lap was grumpy. I was grumpy that lap.
Did you drink those caffeine, those fruit shots that you brought? Did you try those?
When I got my headlamp, I did stick them in my vest just on the off chance. I was like, okay, let's take them. I got to one of the aid stations, like, okay, let's take it a sip. I could not drink it. I took a sip and I was like, this is disgusting. And I spit it out and I was like, nope, we're not going to do that. Fuck the caffeine. You don't need it. You're just going to run on sunshine and rainbows. Let's do this. And I did try, but I was like, no, the taste was so unpleasant. Well, I don't know if it was the caffeine. I don't know what. Because the uncaffeinated ones, I did have at one point, I was like, oh, this tastes very pleasant. And I had mixed it in with my water at one point. But those caffeine ones, nope. I didn't have. The only caffeine that I had would have been in the sips of Coke or ginger ale that I had at the aid stations. Outside that, no caffeine. Pure sunshine and rainbows and adrenaline.
Interesting. Gotcha. So you kind of touched on this a little bit when you're talking about like running at night, but your pacing. I mean, and we talk about this a lot with my training, but and just sort of the running that I do. But how did you manage your pacing for this to keep going for 28 hours and over the 100 miles? Because I know people kind of do different stuff. They run the whole thing. They do like a run walk. It's a deliberate strategy. They kind of wing it. How did you manage that?
My strategy was to have no strategy at all. Woohoo!
So the wing it strategy.
It was the wing it strategy. I had so many backup thoughts. Like, okay, we could run walk, but then what if I get behind in time? Maybe we'll do it by feel. But if I do the run walk and now I have to run up a hill, I didn't like that idea, especially because I wasn't as familiar with the area. Some people had already gone out and run loops because they lived in the area, so you kind of had an idea. I did it based solely on feel. If I wanted to walk, I walked. All the uphills, I pretty much walked, unless it was like super gradual where I wasn't registering it was an uphill. Lap 3, I took out my poles. Whenever I ran, I didn't use them. I just put them in one hand. But whenever I was walking, either flat, gradual uphill, I was using my poles and power hiking. I did set my watch so I could see my pace for a little bit. I was tracking that. And then I noticed my battery was dying. and I stopped it because I wanted to always know what time it was. That was more important than tracking my miles, because if my watch shut off and I had no clue what time it was, I wouldn't know how far behind or ahead of the time cutoff I was. And that would make it feel so much longer mentally. So I stopped my watch, and then I just had the time, and I was gauging things off of time. And let me tell you, when I was in this one section, and Kathleen can attest this because she was like watching and like, why are you going so slow? Now I couldn't hear her thoughts, but that's what she was screaming at from her scream. There was a segment. It was the mile 12 to 18. I think it was mile 72 to 78. And that was the end of my fourth lap. And it was that loop, and my watch wasn't working. And I'm like, there was a bridge that we went over when you went down to start the loop, and that you went up when you were coming out of the loop. And I was like, where is the stupid bridge? I feel like I've gone so many miles. And I look at my watch because I didn't have mileage. I only had time. I was like, this is the longest 6 miles ever. And it was about a mile down and then a mile up. So that little loop was 4 miles. I was like, it's got to have been 4 miles. It's got to have been 4 miles. Why hasn't it been 4 miles yet? And eventually I got there. I was like, thank God. And it felt like it took forever. Time felt really slow on that particular lap. And ironically, for how long the whole event was, when it ended, I was like, wow, that was fast. That went by so fast, which is crazy. It's like 28 to 29 hours, and you're thinking, where did the time go?
It's back on mile 72. That's where it was.
Yeah. It's stopped back there.
Yeah, because I was following you on the live tracking, because I had a race. I was racing in San Jose for the Spartan, but I was tracking you after my race, and then like with the time change, I was behind. It was like 10 o'clock in California, so it was like 1 a.m. your time. And at one point, the live tracking, I don't know if there was a lag on the live tracking, because you were moving pretty good. And I was like, oh yeah, like she finished lap 3. But at one point, there was like a 2-hour lag where you did not move. And I told you that if you didn't move or your splits dropped, I was going to call you. And it wasn't showing, like, it was just showing the checkpoints for like each time, like, I guess there were timing mats like on your laps. I don't know exactly where they were, but it's showing your start finish, and it was showing like your different checkpoints, like for certain miles, but it wasn't showing your splits. But at one point you didn't move for like 2 hours, and I had the phone in my hand, and I almost called you, but I was like, it's 1 a.m. your time. And I was like, should I call? Should I not call? And I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm not going to call. I was like, I'm sure she's fine. I was like, but if I wake up in the morning and like nothing has changed, or it's like still really, because you were really on pace, like you were moving. I was like, I'll call her in the morning. And then when I woke up in the morning, which was really just a couple hours later because I had to work on Sunday, it was like 3 hours later. At that point you were at like mile 92 or something. And I was like, oh no, she's fine.
She's alive.
I was like, what's happening?
Yeah, that 2-hour segment was the 2 hours of hell of that loop.
Yeah, but I almost called you, and I'm glad I didn't, because you would have been like, ah! Well, this is actually a perfect segue to you being tortured in the middle of the night in like lap 72 or mile 72. Sort of like your mental game. Like I know you have your mantras, and you have like your whys, but like how did you sort of deal with like when things get tough and like addressing those challenges? And like, I know not everybody gets in the pain cave, for a lack of a better word, but like how did you sort of deal with those kinds of both mental and like physical challenges that come up at like 3 a.m. when you're in the woods by yourself and you're stuck like I said, like mile 72 in the woods, and wondering why it's taking like 6 hours to run 2 miles? Like how do you handle that? And did you feel that way? Like did you feel bad, or like worse than you thought you were going to feel?
I did not feel as bad as I thought I was going to feel, which I think helped me. The fact that I was prepared to have this horrible state during this, so I had really high expectations of how awful this was going to feel. And I'm not saying I'm an amazing person, athlete who can handle so much pain. even though I feel like I have a good tolerance, I did not hit a pain cave or struggle mentally. So even though, yes, I was super grouchy that round, that one lap, there was never a point where like, I'm not going to do this. I might have said, this sucks. I'm tired. But at no point was I in so much agony that I had to fight my demons or anything like that. I couldn't tell you why.
Like the wheels didn't come off.
The wheels did not come off. I will say, even though Kathleen said I haven't done ultras, I haven't done ultra straight running. I've done some ultra OCRs where it's been 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, which have been my longest runs, which were 36 to maybe 40 something miles. And let me tell you, those felt 10 times worse. I can remember crossing the finish line at those and just like collapsing on the ground and be like, oh my God, I'm dead. And I didn't feel that way during these. Maybe those were because I was running harder because the time frame was different and it wasn't like hit a certain distance. It was keep going and do all these obstacles. So the intensity was so much higher than in this one. This one was just longer, chiller. It doesn't mean I didn't get bored or anything. I'm someone who can zone out while running. And if you ask me what I was thinking about, I couldn't tell you. I do know that there were multiple times that I sang 99 bottles of beer on the wall. I did. And I would just like count. And I would probably sang it wrong, but I did that and the numbers would go down. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't even tell you when I was no longer doing it because it just kind of like just disappeared and I was now running. And then at some point I was like, hey, wasn't I doing 99 bottles of beer on the wall? Oh shit. What number did I get to? Some of my thoughts were when we were doing the loop, I could look across and see where my pit station was. And I was like, I could be over there. Blah. Or the first guy, I was at the first aid station on lap 2 and the first guy came in behind me. I was like, oh my God, that's so sad. I'm on mile 26 and this guy's on 46. He's literally 20 miles ahead of me. How fucking slow are you going, Aaliyah? Like it was just so comical that, and very impressive too. It's very impressive how fast some of these people run. I mean, they're not necessarily running. They're jogging, but it's so steady. The only time I felt very uncomfortable was during that 72, 78. And then my Achilles actually started to get really irritated, especially on the uphills, because when I would plant my foot, it would lengthen and it would feel really irritated. The flats in the downhill felt fine. And then I was worried for lap 5 that was really going to come into play. And luckily it wasn't. It didn't come into play that much. So I felt like my mental game was really good. There's a guy that I know and he had just done an ultra. He's an ultra runner. He did it in like 16 hours and he sent me a message. He was so excited I was doing this. He's like, you're going to crush it. And one of the things he said to me was like, you're not even going to have an issue mentally. You're just so positive and cheerful. That's not going to be the part that gets you. Because I was trying to anticipate this awful feeling. And the fact that it never came, I think that helped me, that I was expecting something so horrendous and then it never came, which just kept me moving.
Well, plus, I mean, I also, like, you know, when you went into it, like you were trained, you were prepared. You know, I think sometimes people who have negative experiences are people who maybe aren't prepared.
Maybe. I wouldn't say I felt the most prepared since I've never done 100 miles. And also I was kind of just jumping into it. I wouldn't say I trained for this like most people do. Most people legit train months, years. I was like, fuck it. Let's rip off the Band-Aid. Because if you remember, there was the one in Illinois that you were telling me about. They're like, oh, this one's not bad. Do this one. I was contemplating it. And then,
you don't want to wait till November, though.
Yeah, I didn't want to wait till November. That was too long. The anticipation of waiting, I was like, oh my God, that's going to be so hard. That's more painful to me than running the 100 miles. Waiting to do this race was more.
But you also have the base of fitness and the experience of fitness that like most average people don't have, where like you can jump into a race and not die.
Yes, I feel like I did have that on my side. And that's how I like to personally view fitness is I should be able to do whatever, whether it's a triathlon, a strongman, just dive right in. I may not be the best, but I'm going to do pretty damn well considering. Obviously, yes, there's certain things you need to prepare for. Like if I did this and didn't have my kit set up just in case, or didn't have my lights and my chargers, there's always some prep that has to go in, because then I'm just not being smart about it. I can be stupid to a certain degree, but I also got to be a little intelligent while handling the spontaneity.
You survive. No real physical challenges, little things, no memorable mental stuff. You crossed the finish line. The buckle is yours. It is in your hands. How do you feel?
I had some feelings. I for sure had some feelings. My feelings actually started at mile 18. The pit crew at that 12, 18 mile station that I saw so frequently, they pretty much saw you through your ups and downs. If you had any, their motivation, they're getting to know you a little bit. I remember coming up to mile, I guess it was 92, and the woman's like, woo, my girl, there she is. Yeah, last lap. You're getting really excited. And she's like, okay, this is the last little bit. And there was no nutrition that I really needed. That last lap, I was like, I don't want to fucking eat anything. I just want to motor through this. That was kind of like the mantra for that last lap. I was like, get this done. And I went on that 6 mile loop, came back up. And right when it came up, they're like, oh my God, this is it. Okay, last little bit nutrition. We don't want to keep you here. You're going to roll out. And the woman who was talking to me, who I kept seeing, she was like, you did it. And I was starting to get all the feelings. I definitely teared up. I was like, oh my God, that's so close. Like, it's an overwhelming feeling. And also, I'm trying to hold it together as well, because then you're going out, you still have these 2 miles to go. But as I was going away, I felt, I don't know if it was a sense of accomplishment, because also you're tired. So it's almost like there's a moment where it feels like time froze and you just feel everything. You feel exhausted, you feel tired, you feel elated, and you can't control your emotions. And so they kind of well up. And so that happened at mile 98 when she was talking to me. And it was just so nice to have people I didn't even know there who are probably more excited than me about this accomplishment, because they're seeing you the entire time coming in and out. And that really hit me. And then when I came into the finish line, so they had a live stream, and I was like, I'm just going to walk it in aggressively, nothing too hard. The live stream people came up, they're like, we're going to see you into the finish line. And I was like, oh man, I guess I better run. And they were like, do what you need to do. And in my head, I'm like, I can't be walking on this live stream. If we're going to finish it, we're going to finish it. So then I start jogging. It feels like a run, but you're jogging. They're following along, and I feel fine. I'm not thinking about anything. My feels kind of had dissipated after I left that aid station. And then when I crossed the finish line and they give me my buckle, then I had almost like a similar feeling of where time stopped and I'm welling up, and I'm trying not to, because they're still like talking to me, and I'm trying to like compose myself while also staying in the moment, because it's not very often that you feel like that and you kind of want to hold on to it a little bit. It's this sense of like, holy shit, what did I just do? Paired with, oh my God, I just did that. And there's not like a big parade when you finish. It's just like you and a couple of people who do the timing thing, or pit crews who are waiting for their runners. And I definitely welled up there again. I was like, oh my God, I'm done. And then after that, when I sat down, I was just like crashing. I crashed. I held on for so long that when I sat, the wave of heaviness came over me of, you're so tired, you're so hungry, and then I could barely like put my stuff away.
Yeah, because I wasn't watching the live stream, but I was watching the live tracking, and I saw you cross mile 9 marker 98, and I was like, bitch, go! Like, I was like, you're gonna make it. I was so excited for you. I was like telling everybody I knew in California. I was like, it's my coach. She's running 100 miles today. Like, cause it is exciting for like your friends and family. And it's a huge accomplishment. And like, it should feel special. And, in my opinion, it should feel special and like emotional. And it's like, you're out there, like, it's like you're doing it for you. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think that's amazing. And I'm so proud of you. And like, you should be proud of yourself. And I think it's awesome. And yeah, and then you feel like shit and you got to go pack up your stuff in the car.
I know, it's high and then this super, super low.
You're like, I got to put my cooler away.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, I made someone else put it away. I made these two people stand behind. I was like, are you guys feeling particularly strong today? Because I need you to put this in my car.
All I can lift is this buckle.
What I think was particularly cool about this event, and I've seen it also talked about, is that even though running is such a solo sport, it's also not. Like, I couldn't have done it without those people at the aid stations, the people who, it seems insignificant, but like the people who watch my dog, the people who helped with coaching while I was gone, everybody who sent messages. It just, not that you need other people to make you feel special, but it made me feel so overwhelmed that there were many people who reached out to me, who wished me good luck. It just felt amazing. It made the moment feel even better, which I actually wasn't expecting that. I didn't even expect people to really care that I was doing it. Yeah, because I was like, oh, it's this cool thing. And in my head, it's like really not that big of a deal, but it is. And that was really, really unique about this event, because a lot of people know that I'm into fitness, and how many times do people wish me luck when I do just a race on the weekend that I normally do? Not that many. But then this, like, people were invested in it, which was cool, because I'm like, why do you care that I'm doing this 100 miles? I'm going to be so fucking slow. I'm just like snail. I'm eventually going to get there. But it's almost like they're living vicariously through you, because either they're not going to do it, or they're so excited for you because they've gone through that. Like, oh my God, I know what it feels like. She's going to feel like that. It's so cool. Like you were like, do it. And I was like, fuck you, and then now I've done it. And I'm like, ugh.
I think that's a testament though to your community, and it's a testament like also to the ultra running community. I mean, the ultra running community is amazing. And like, I mean, just in my experience, like the races that I've done, like the aid stations are incredible, and just the race directors are incredible, and they put on these like really special events, and it doesn't matter if you're the first person or the last person. Like it's just a really special experience. And I am super glad you got to experience it firsthand for yourself for when you coach me for my next one. I am super glad you got to have this experience for yourself. I guess so now that this is all done, like, what are your takeaways? Like, what have you learned about like your performance? What have you learned, I guess, about yourself? Like that, like takeaways that, I guess new takeaways from.
That's a big question. One of the things that I was also expecting that I don't feel like I had experienced was this life-changing experience. So some of the people talk about how they can't process it, and it's like, whoa, I've learned this about myself. I came out as a new person. They had revelations. I don't know that I had that, and I kind of wish I did. And if I took something away from it, it would be that I'm my own limiting factor, which I kind of already knew, but now this just solidifies it in the sense of, look, there is no cap unless you put a cap on it, because you didn't even fucking train for this and you still did it. Someone had sent me a message when I needed some motivation, and I sent them a message. I was like, tell me something motivational. And I happened to wake up to this text message, and it said 100 miles. Most people won't even drive that far without complaining. You've trained, you've pushed, and now it's time to prove what you're made of. Every step is a story. Keep moving forward. You've got more in you than you know. And the part that stuck out to me the most was that first part, is that there's so many people who wouldn't even drive 100 miles, let alone even conceive of running 100 miles. And the fact that there isn't a cap unless you tell yourself you can't do it, this, as I said before, solidifies that concept. And that if I want to do anything, which I believed before, shit, I'm just going to do it. Because why can't I?
Exactly. I think as long as you show up for yourself, you put in the work. I mean, I think you could do anything. Any of us can do anything.
And the further I get away from it, I feel like this goes without saying, even for any race where you're like, I'm never going to do that again. Like, I don't know if I'll do another 100 miles again.
That was my last question. That was my last question, because the first thing you said to me when you were done, you were like, I'm never fucking doing this again. And I was going to ask you, now that you've had a tiny bit of distance in the rear view, if you were going to ever do this again or something similar.
It's very possible that I will do something like this again, or something bigger, because usually some of the lower distances, like I've never done a 50K or a 50 miler. It's like, let me cross all those off in one go. I'm not always the most patient. When it comes to that, I'd rather just do it. And the spontaneity is what's really exciting for me. That's why I didn't want to wait till November. It's like, let's do this now. Can you do it now? So a race might come up, or maybe I'll do some more ultras. I do like having them broken up because I feel more accomplished and exerted. I like the exerted feeling. This was a different type. This was exhaustion, lack of sleep, keep going. But I didn't feel like pedal to the metal, which is really exciting. And don't tell me to run faster than the 100 miles, because I don't know if I would have finished if I ran faster. Because obviously there's people who are running fast. They do push for sure. Maybe during some of the ultra OCR events, I'll be able to push more like I used to. That feeling of being so tired. Because that's also really enjoyable to me, is exertion. Because I was like, when I finished 26 miles, I was like, maybe I'll stick to marathons. These are so much shorter. Ha!
Yeah. Or even maybe like if you don't do 100, if you do like a 50, whether you could run faster. Well, I was just going to say before we wrap up, because again, I'm going to give a massive plug for Aaliyah's coaching. Like I said earlier, we've been working together for 3 years, and Aaliyah has successfully coached me through every stupid thing I have wanted to do. Through everything, through like a Spartan 50K, through the Tough Mudder Holy Grail, which is an 8-hour day race, a 12-hour night race, and a 24-hour race, through 101.5 miles. So if you're looking, for anything, if you're looking to do CrossFit, personal training, anything stupid you are interested in becoming better at, contact Aaliyah and she will help you accomplish your goals. And again, congratulations on your amazing accomplishment. I am super, super proud of you. And I really hope you do another one.
If you guys have any questions about the 100 miler that Kathleen didn't cover, or maybe you're interested in, shoot her or I a message. And going off of what Kathleen said, yep, if you're interested in any type of training, shoot me a message, because I love crazy shit. I'll do crazy shit and I'll help you get through it. So thank you so much for tuning in to The Flex with Aaliyah. Kathleen, I appreciate you coming on, asking me all the fun questions.
Thank you for letting me ask them to you. I'm happy to be here.
And we will catch you next time on The Flex with Aaliyah. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and of course, stay flexy.